Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
Well, there's a party each and every year on Christmas Eve, where the fun and cocktail shrimp don't seem to end. Clark and Ralphie taking turns on the TV screen, laughing, singing, yelling with all of our friends. Well, it's Christmas, and everybody's gonna spread the holiday cheer. 'Cause it's Christmas. Whoa, oh, it's the best time of the year.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Matt.
We are back. It is spooky season. This is actually coming out on my birthday. And I thought the best
happy birthday, Matt. Yay!
Thank you. I thought the best birthday gift I could grant myself was to invite my longtime friend, Tommy Avallone, on the podcast so that he can talk about his new documentary that's coming out like in a week, The House From. So, Tommy, tell us about this documentary because I know you've been working on this thing for like half a decade.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, 5 years. We started filming in 2019. Long story short, the only Hollywood party I ever went to, right?
Yeah.
John Stamos was there. We kind of already knew each other vaguely, and I was talking to him, and like he just pawned me over to Jeff Franklin, you know? And I was like, you know what's interesting about you? You own the Full House house. I want to make a documentary about houses. He's like, let's meet up. So we exchanged information. I went to his house, which he lives at the old Ciela Drive Manson murder house.
Oh.
And then he told me about the other infamous house he owns, the Full House house. And we set up a thing to fly out to San Francisco, start filming. And that was it. Like we just filmed this, the Full House house, one of the most famous houses, was the first one to the party. We tried to pitch it as a TV show. No one wanted it because there was no one murdered in any of these houses except for Jeff's house that he did not want filmed. And then, so we just said, F it, let's just make it our own thing, you know? And so we just made our own doc.
It's like mind-blowing to me that people weren't interested in that as a TV show because I feel like that would be a fascinating, like, 10-part bingeable show on a streaming service.
Like,
it doesn't even need to be a 10-part. It's a repeatable. You know, it's like each thing could be but they wanted stakes. What's the sizzle? They want, some people want the game show-ify it, you know? It's just like, you know, these things need to be made for the lowest common denominator, you know?
And that's so weird because I feel like Netflix at a point was eating that stuff up. Like the toys that made us, the movies that made us.
Yeah, there was really
like,
no stakes to the toys that made us.
Yeah.
Well, they told us, they said, if we're going to make it, we're just going to make it on our own, and it's going to be the TV houses that made us or the movie houses that made us. So, like, we don't need you.
Oh. Fair. Well, and you... From what I understand from just like following you as you worked on this project, there's a ton of houses that you visited that aren't even in this movie, right?
I would just visit houses in general. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, living in New Jersey, we would drive up to like the Quick Stop and all these spots from Clerks and do all that sort of stuff, you know, 15 minutes from the Rocky Steps and you run up those things. So I always thought this high school near me was the clock tower from Back to the Future, but it wasn't. It just looked like it, you know? So, yeah, I always did that stuff, always, especially when I first moved to L.A. We went to the Wonder Years house and Freddy Krueger's house. So I was always thought, I was like, oh, how can I make this into a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just my passion that turned into a doc.
So the listeners who are, you know, tuning into an all year round Christmas podcast, there's at least two very noteworthy Christmassy houses that are in this documentary, right? You've got the Christmas Story house and the Home Alone house are in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could not, right? I feel like the clips that you've seen, the Home Alone stuff is awesome. You showed me a lot of like clips from that one specifically that I was able to see maybe a year ago, where it's just a fascinating story about the people that have to live. I feel like the more interesting story of the people who live across the street from the Home Alone house.
Right. So that's like out of necessity, you know, like sometimes like these people, you know, it's tough. Like we started making this during COVID. So we're like, I'm running like handwritten letters to these people's house, like to the houses, sometimes finding their emails, you know, and, you know, you're asking, hey, I'm a stranger. Can I come in your house during COVID and film this? And some people don't want more attention. So you have to find creative ways to do it. Like the current owners of the Home Alone house, the house is for sale. So, but like the current owners didn't really want to be interviewed, you know? But you can't not have the Home Alone house in a famous houses documentary. So, you know, we reached out to the owners of the house that lived there when Home Alone was filmed, you know, and the neighbors and the real estate agent who sold that house. So it's like we just covered the house completely without ever stepping foot inside, you know?
Yeah, no, that's perfect though. Well, let's take a pause from this. We'll dive into what this episode is actually about, because another thing I know about you, Tommy, is you love Ghostbusters. You're a big Ghostbusters guy. So I picked this one specifically for you being on the show, which is the first season, episode 13 of The Real Ghostbusters. Xmas marks the spot. Terrible pun name that tells you nothing about the episode.
Nothing in this episode is about finding buried treasure.
Dylan, you were texting me before we jumped on here because I think this is kind of you're the youngest of the three.
Yeah, so
I think this is your first experience with Real Ghostbusters, and you had a burning question.
Off and on, really. Like, I was aware of the Real Ghostbusters, but like I'm 32, so like when I was a kid, like my cartoon version of the Ghostbusters were the Extreme Ghostbusters, and like that Men in Black cartoon, and that like. I just remember waking up early before school, and I would see the most like fucked up animation ever that just scarred me for life in those like weird 90s versions of these shows. So seeing the Real Ghostbusters for the first time, I had seen the characters like in drawing, and I just assumed that these were different Ghostbusters. And it wasn't until today that I realized that, oh no, these are supposed to be like Ray and Egon from the movies. And that's when I texted you. I was like, were they forced to make these characters look nothing like their movie counterparts? Because Egon's hair is very distracting throughout this entire thing.
Yeah, he's got like Beavis and Butthead hair throughout most of it.
I know some of this. Do you want me to chime in?
Please
I was going to say, is this a likeness situation?
Yeah, please do.
So the original idea. Okay, so I produced this movie called GhostHeads in 2016. So that's what?
Almost 10 years ago.
8 years ago? 8 years ago.
Man.
So some of this may be wrong.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember from 8 years ago, okay?
We're always factual on here. We say fact checking. So.
Well, so Maurice LaMarche, like I think his name is the voice of Egon. He was saying that like they wanted it to feel different from the guys, even though it's the same names, all that stuff. They wanted it to feel different, so no one do an like for the voices, you know. So everyone was supposed to sound different. And then LaMarche was like just trying to figure out a voice, and he just went. He's like, you know what? I'm just gonna do an Egon impression, and they hired it. But so the idea I think there is like initially they wanted to this feel a little removed from the movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they started to lean into it either way, but. You weren't supposed to sound like Bill Murray. You weren't supposed to sound like, you know, Ray or Winston or anything like that. But I think I'm saying his name right. LaMarche he just went for it and he got it. So I feel like there was a sort of top down sort of let's make this feel somewhat different. But what's funny is the kids loved Winston so much with no mustache that's why in Ghostbusters 2 he doesn't have a mustache in the movie.
That's amazing. I actually didn't know that last part.
That's such a weird, like we voted the mustache out. Like, come back.
Yeah.
No
well, the first one, he's got the mustache, right?
Yeah.
Well, and because like they weren't selling a lot of toys based on the movie Ghostbusters, but boy, were they selling a shit ton of toys based on the real Ghostbusters.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, so, money talked in that situation.
But it was a different world. You didn't make adult toys. Like,
no.
People don't buy adult toys, like back then, It's when men were men.
It's true. When men played football and baseball and sports.
They didn't cry or show emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't play with their toys in their 40s.
One of those moments for me early on in this was like, there are certain things that are so burned into the back of my brain that I don't realize it's still there until I started it. And for me, it was the opening credits of this. Like, obviously the song is just the same as the movie, but I remembered every single shot that was going to show up in these opening credits, because this was like one of my Saturday morning cartoons for sure. And Dylan, when you talk about like getting the shit scared out of you, there was like 2 or 3 episodes of Real Ghostbusters where the animation was just... There was one where like someone turned into a were-chicken, and I remember the transformation fucking me up at like 5.
Well, that's like before I had seen this episode, my experience with them was just kind of seeing pictures of the main cast, like the main 4, and seeing the opening. I was like, okay, because I didn't realize that there was a connection between Extreme Ghostbusters and Real Ghostbusters, because there's like crossover moments at some point. But yeah, when I watched the opening, I was like, all right, I actually feel like I could go back and check this out and sit down. And I'm not one to usually do that. So I'm actually looking forward to checking out some more Real Ghostbusters for sure.
And this episode's goofy as hell. I love the concept of this episode. They go back in time for no explainable reason. They're just
back in time. Like
they don't.
At the end, it did sound like the Ghost of Christmas Present. It was all part of his plan.
They were teaching Venkman.
Peter.
It was a teachable moment.
But I'll say this, like, either my memory made this up or it really happened, but I remember there being a version of Real Ghostbusters where Egon was still back in the trap or something with a ghost, and he was literally stretched out, and some ghost was, like, jumping on him like a trampoline. And that for sure was in my nightmares countless times.
Tommy, I literally wrote down... in my notes, I swear there was another episode where Egon goes into the containment unit. And I think he's trapped in there, and it's like they bring back all of these ghosts from past episodes that are pissed off that he captured them and like put them in this unit. Like when that scene was happening, I was like, wait, they did this a second time.
And that makes a lot more sense because these ghosts were coming at him, but like I feel like if this was a real life situation, all of those ghosts would be out for blood as soon as Egon enters that containment unit.
Yeah, they're ready to go. Just the idea. So for people who haven't watched this episode, it is free on YouTube. Give it a watch. The premise is that the Ghostbusters bust the ghosts from Scrooge before they can change Scrooge.
Which is a great idea.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, before you get into it, I ask this every time you interview me. So what is this podcast? Is this just, are you guys just talking about Ghostbusters, or you just talk Christmas all year round?
Christmas all year round,
Christmas
baby.
365.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just randomly pick Ghostbusters for this. Okay, this makes sense. Okay. Yeah. I thought you were doing like a real Ghostbusters rewatch.
Well, yeah, because I've had you on a Boy Meets World recap podcast once.
I mean, to go back to anyone who's listening, I've known Matt for quite some time, probably over a decade. And
definitely. It might be 2 decades, Tommy. It was, how long ago were you on the Kid Chris show? That's when I messaged
you. Wow. That's crazy. That's so crazy. Not on a relationship, on just time passing.
Yeah.
Every single time I go, what is this podcast? Like, what are we doing? You know, because like if you're saying about like Ghostbusters for the first time, I was like, well, there's no way this is a Real Ghostbusters podcast.
No.
So so you're just talking Christmas. Okay.
Yeah. Now I also want to be clear. I am very familiar with all things Ghostbusters that isn't this specific 80s cartoon.
Let me say something. You can't say you're all things Ghostbusters if you haven't watched this cartoon.
This is the most Ghostbusters chunk of Ghostbusters,
don't rub it in that you're 32 years old. But let me just tell you, like, it's like that's where it is. Like, Ghostbusters is a great movie and fantastic. But it's the real Ghostbusters that got hooked all those fans.
And I think that's awesome, and I think that's why I'm
Damn you kids.
Yeah.
Because now that you're saying that, Real
off,
Ghostbusters is the most hours of Ghostbusters that you can watch.
Makes sense.
It's great. It's fantastic.
And because I haven't seen it, I think that's why when we've gotten these legacy sequels, I'm sitting here like, why are we treating this like it's some huge franchise? Because I didn't have that experience, you know.
Yeah, you
like
just had two movies from the 80s.
I had 2 movies and Ecto Cooler.
Right, yeah.
Hey, Mark, I was listening to Paramore the other day, and it really made me think about the amygdala and the limbic system.
You just made those words up, didn't you?
What, Paramore?
We're the Nevermind the Music podcast, where one musician
and one psychologist
talk songwriting and the mind, one song at a time.
We'll hear everything from Green Day and Outkast
to Stevie Wonder and Dua Lipa.
And we mostly try to stay on topic.
Except for when we don't want to.
Nevermind the Music, wherever you get your podcasts.
But it's so funny looking back. Like, this is, I'm going to exclude you and just talk directly to Matt real quick.
Yeah.
Just like, because we're a similar age, right? But like, you know, like, we look back and thinking how DuckTales and Darkwing Duck or Rescue Rangers was such a huge franchise. There was 3 seasons, 2 seasons, if that, and like 8 toys. That's it. You know, and like, but our childhood, it's like they were everything. They're Disney Afternoon.
But Ghostbusters and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were that exception where it's like
Turtles
they ran for years, and there were like thousands of toys. Like the amount of spin-off figures that they would come up with for those 2 franchises, because like the sky was the limit. My bathroom still has a Ghostbusters toilet action figure inside of it because it was just like, fuck it, yeah, let's make a haunted toilet as a toy and kids are gonna buy it. Like,
I mean, I always think when I walk down the toy section, there's always gonna be Turtles, there's always gonna be Ghostbusters, and there's always gonna be wrestling. Yeah, it's just like nonstop toys all the time.
Yes, no, 100%. So the real quick breakdown of this episode, because there's not much going on there. They capture the ghosts. They realize
I love anytime Christmas Carol gets put into something.
Oh, it's the
Christmas
best.
Carol is my favorite. You know, I just anytime, and then like you would think, I love when they take like the Ghostbusters and attack like a historical ghost, like, you know, like Jesus or something like that. Yeah. It's always like funny. And
did the Ghostbusters bust Jesus? And I forgot.
Is that a thing that happens?
No, I'm just talking like fan art, you know?
Because now I'm 100% back in. That's the episode I want to watch.
No, but like, you know, fan art with like historical ghosts.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so I never knew they did this episode, but when watching it, I was like, oh, I've totally seen this, but I don't remember, you know?
With how much I watched The Real Ghostbusters, I had to have seen this episode at a different time and just not remembered it as strongly.
Yeah.
But like, I love the idea that because Scrooge isn't haunted by these ghosts and they're treating Scrooge like he is a historical figure and this was a true story, all of Christmas is ruined now. Like, Christmas ceases to exist because Scrooge got his way to like make everyone hate Christmas. So they have to go back and as Ray, Winston, and Peter recreate what the ghosts would have done while Egon's trying to save them from the... It's a great little concept. And Tommy, we're talking about toys. I have to ask, I am almost positive that I owned a toy of Egon in that containment unit suit.
Yes.
like that was a figure that they made.
If you squeeze his hands, his eyes might have bugged out.
Yeah. I think his eyes popped out and the front chest plate dropped down or something like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I thought it was a tie. Maybe the tie came out. But yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh my God, he's like, it's thinner, but it's because like he was heavier in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally a toy.
The one bit that I actually got a nice little chuckle out of, it's a great line of dialogue, is when Egon comes out of the containment unit after saving the ghosts. He says, "Great work, Janine. No time to talk," and just runs away.
No, my thought was like, if they caught the ghosts, and then now and then Scrooge writes this book, that stops Christmas. When they go back as ghosts, and then he gets visited by the ghost again, does the new Christmas story now have 6 ghosts? You know, 3 are just like foolish.
Yeah.
You know, and the other 3 do the job. Like, are the real Ghostbusters now involved with the new Christmas Carol?
Yeah. Like, he tells the tale of a ghost pushing him in a chair with a viewfinder over his eyes.
Yeah. And then we have to go back, and every adaptation of the Christmas Carol now has the Ghostbusters in it. That's the world we're gonna live in.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the end, when Janine's like, they were saying something about 3 ghosts. I was waiting for Janine to go, no, there was 6.
Yeah.
Like I was waiting for that line, you know?
So
that would have been so good.
Does the close relationship of Janine and Slimer continue out through the whole series? Because I love their like, they do have kind of like a
buddies.
friendship here. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think they're like, Eric and Mr. Feeney in like Boy Meets World.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dylan, I don't know if you know this, but the Slimer character became so popular that I think it was like the 3rd or 4th season, the show's name literally changed to Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense because, like, Slimer was everywhere. Like, Slimer became almost the mascot for the Ghostbusters at one point. And as somebody who had only seen the movies and Extreme Ghostbusters, like, I didn't understand why, because he's not a huge part of those movies. He's got great bits in those movies, but it's not like you're not like, oh shit, Slimer's back.
Yeah, I mean, they had to put Slimer in part 2 because the kids would have lost their minds if they watched an entire Ghostbusters
Slimer
movie and Slimer
and then
didn't
Winston
show up.
without a mustache. Those were the two things that brought people back.
Those were the 2
Ghostbusters
non-negotiables when they were making that movie.
For sure.
But yeah, all in all, I don't know if Dylan, is this going to go into your yearly Christmas rotation now? You're going to make it a point to watch this?
I am more likely to check out more Real Ghostbusters than I am to make this a yearly watch. It's not a bad Christmas episode, but like it's just
I liked it.
Yeah, it's a good episode it's a good cartoon. I'll definitely watch it again, but it's not going to become like a weekly watch or yearly watch. Sorry.
I know this is a crazy thing to say, but the fact that it's 25 minutes just says so much more about cartoons from the 80s than now, because now a cartoon's like 20 to 22 minutes long to make space for all the all the ads. This was a pretty tight 25 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm for it.
Now, Tommy, we got to talk something else Christmassy, because beyond the fact that you've got The House From, which is dropping, I want to say it's the 28th of October. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, we're premiering at Kevin Smith's Festival the 25th. We're going to be on the Maximum Effort channel on the 27th, and we'll be on iTunes, Amazon, and Google October 28th.
Perfect. So go watch that on October 28th. But Tommy also directed what is still one of my all-time favorite documentaries, and it's celebrating 10 years.
A yearly watch for me.
Yeah, this is a yearly watch for me. Yeah. Every year I watch and I cry. Tommy, we got to talk about I Am Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Cool. The 10th anniversary Blu-ray is coming out. I think it's going to be November. You know, it's a Vinegar Syndrome sort of / Enjoy the Ride release. So we put a whole bunch of I think 5 hours of special features in there. So it'll be fun.
Oh, nice.
I'm excited.
I can't wait to shell out for that. I'm so excited.
It's funny, and I still it's unfortunate that Santa Jim, Santa Russell, and Santa Bob have passed away, but even when Russell was alive, I still try to incorporate him in the movies. There's this scene in the Bill Murray stories where we had this drawing and someone's explaining something, and it's a drawing of Russell, and even it's not out yet, but it will be out by the time this podcast comes out. But the new design for the houses, there's a guy mowing the lawn, and it's Russell.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, Russell is the heart and soul of that documentary to me.
Russell to me is so, because he was one of those people where I'm you could totally judge a book by its cover. I looked at his picture on MySpace as this guy's going to be interesting, And so he's my symbol or my beacon of trust your gut. I even have him tattooed. Wait, where is he? There.
Oh, there he is.
God, I love it.
Yeah. But, I love Russell, and I talked to Russell's daughter for our Blu-ray. I mean, he always just cracked me up because he was a lot to handle, but in a fun way.
Yeah. Was there something that sent you down that path, a specific moment that you were I want to definitely make this documentary on these different Santa Clauses?
Well, yeah, I mean, me and my wife were at the mall, and and we saw this guy Santa. I was like, I wonder what life that guy goes home to. And it was just following that thread, because like I am not a Christmas guy, or at least wasn't, It always, like, I don't like the idea of stress around a holiday or around a particular day to get it to be perfect. But so it was just following that thread. Like, what is it like to look like Santa all year round? That seems silly, and it just worked out.
I can't wait for this Blu-ray to come out, obviously. But I do have to ask another question. I feel like you've dropped this, but maybe you haven't. Years ago, you told me that there was one thing that you tried to get into every single film that you made, and that was a wrestler.
It's tough. It's tough, So
I was going to say, obviously, I Am Santa Claus. You've got a wrestler as one of your main Santas.
Yeah, that's the mecca. We have Foley in there. DDP's in the credits. We have Piper. We have Lawler, Dreamer, and Meanie. So that's like the mecca, right?
Yeah.
And Bill Murray stories. We interviewed George the Animal Steel.
Oh,
right?
Shit. Nice.
But it got cut. It's in the DVD, and he's thanked in the credits. So that kind of counts.
Yeah,
right?
counts, yeah.
Now, Waldo on Weed. All right, so that's a movie about a kid with cancer, and they're using cannabis to help that, right?
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. But the woman who they got the cannabis from, Dr. Dina, she mentions that Snoop Dogg gave her her name. And Snoop Dogg is in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Dude, I had no idea where you were going. I was like, he got RVD or something. That's awesome.
There you go. And then Barney, this guy, right, that one, when we're talking about the 90s, I purposely put Stone Cold Steve Austin dropping a stunner.
Yep. Boy, did you.
In there.
Heck yeah.
I remember watching it on it was Peacock it was on, right?
Yeah.
I remember watching it on Peacock, and as soon as Stone Cold showed up with that one stunner, I said, he's keeping the record going.
And houses, I found out that Mick Foley and Mickey visited the Halloween house, the Schroed house. So there's one picture of him with the pumpkin on the thing. So it does still work.
I love it.
That's
I love that you've been keeping that dream alive.
For somehow, I don't know why I did it, but in the credits of Waldo, I thanked professional wrestling.
I feel like Waldo.
Oh, in GhostHeads, we had Zack Ryder.
That's right. You definitely had Zack Ryder in GhostHeads. I remember that.
Matt Cardona.
Whatever. I think that Waldo, if I was going to, I mean, obviously I would tell people to go see The House From, because that's the new one. But if you were going to dive into any of the other Tommy stuff, I think Waldo on Weed, because it's not about a pop culture sensation, is the one that kind of gets buried. And I think I think it is such a beauty. Like, if you want to watch something where your heart is just being tugged for an hour and a half, like, Waldo on Weed will get the tears coming out.
That's the one. Like, us having this conversation, that's the one that in my head I'm like, I'm checking that out today. Like, I definitely want to see that.
It's my favorite movie I've done. And I think it's like interesting because it's like, I think I was just really primed to make it in that, like, I came right off of Murray and went right into editing Waldo. So like I didn't have like a break with my editing skills. Like, I just kept going. And like, because from Santa to GhostHeads to, GhostHeads to Murray, like my editing, like I would just like take a break or whatever. But like, because those movies came out back to back, like I just feel like my skills were just improving, and I feel like Waldo's my best like crafted movie, like it's for sure the one that definitely doesn't get mentioned. And I always get a kick out of it. Yeah. But it's played Tribeca, it has Whoopi Goldberg as EP. It's just like, it's a really strong story. And that's the one I like the most. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the one I think the most people should check out. Tommy, thank you for joining us. Thank you for talking a little bit of Ghostbusters, a little bit of Christmas, and a lot of Doc. Is there anywhere that people should go to stay on top of stuff, not just for House From, but whatever your next future projects are? I know you've sent me a couple pitches on what you're trying to do next, but we won't dive into that. But when one of them becomes a reality, where can people find out?
There's no trying that. I always do. Just my name, Tommy Avallone, and the number 3. It's Instagram's usually where I hang out the most. I have a blue check on Instagram, and I didn't pay for it.
Nice.
All right, and Dylan, we'll be back next week with more Christmas horror,
more Christmas goodness
combos.
as we do.
What's your next
week.
Christmas thing? What are you gonna watch?
We're doing, actually, to tie into Bill Murray's stories, I guess we can announce this here. The episode that we're going to do the week right before Halloween is going to be Scrooged this year as our final Christmas horror. So
nice.
Stay tuned for more of that.
Oh, whoa, oh, now we won't stop till the big ball drops on New Year's. Happy holiday, have a great holiday, have a merry happy holiday.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.